Welcome to Cancer and Peace. My name is Sean Stewart, and I'm here with Peter Scalzo for the 100th time we're doing this episode. So that's pretty cool, right?
Yeah, very.
So I think we wanted to reflect a bit on your time and our time together on this 100th episode, kind of half celebration. I see that you wore your celebration gear. I mean, the same thing you always wear.
Yeah, the de minimis clothing
De
that
minimis.
I have. Yeah.
Yeah, as long as you didn't wear a Speedo, I was okay with this whole thing. Yeah,
Yeah, no, I didn't do that.
So, well, this is exciting, I think,
Yeah.
think because I think neither one ever thought we would be
No.
sitting here 100 episodes later,
Yeah.
still talking about cancer and peace and all that has gone inside of it. And so
Yeah.
today, I think we want to reflect a bit on this journey, your journey and the journey of cancer and peace. What maybe we're going to talk about the foundations of what we think are important foundations in a journey of peace. And we would call it like an inner journey and a recovery journey and a cancer and peace journey. But I think I wanted to just see, compared to where you start at,
Yeah.
where are you at today from
Yeah, I
100
think-
episodes later?
Well, I remember 2 years ago, essentially, where I was exploring what to do next. Was there a next? I didn't even know. And, should I be still speaking out about the cancer journey? It seemed like a lot of people would ask me, inquire, and then I would do a Facebook post and it would usually get 1,000 to 2,000 views. So I knew there was still an interest in how's Peter's cancer journey going, his health journey? How is he navigating it? I kept still being invited to public forums to speak on it and stuff. So I think if all that had dried up, I would have been like, okay, God's done with me doing this. But I didn't have that sense. So I had enjoyed some podcasts in other areas of my life. For instance, I was getting back into dating after a very long marriage and not having a clue how to do it. So I was listening to podcasts and
So
on
you
different
learned how to
subjects.
date by podcast.
Yeah. And tell my girlfriend.
Yeah.
She would say they were good podcasts, I bet. But anyway, what I enjoyed was the forum
Yeah.
of that setup of having a podcast, and I could listen to it while I'm driving, walking, whatever. And I thought, boy, wouldn't it be fun? Because I already had a book, already had been doing other things. Wouldn't it be great to have a podcast type setup? And I prayed about it and felt like God gave me a green light. And of course, at the same time, I was talking to you. I was talking to Jack and probably John, our other buddy, Johnny M, as to what this would look like if we did a podcast. And you so graciously have offered me the studio at CBFNY. And I eventually hired Jack on to be the producer. And you give me your time every Wednesday as...
You turned down big offers from ABC, CBS, NBC, all
Yeah.
the big ones, right? Fox?
Yeah, I must have missed those asks.
Oh, you missed them.
Yeah, I think so. I don't have any recollection of that.
Sorry.
But anyway, for me personally, and I've had a lot of people ask me different aspects about the cancer journey, but I've always felt led to focus really on a very limited point of view with my cancer journey, which is an emotional and spiritual point of view with it. Like, how do I navigate, is a better word, a 20-year cancer journey emotionally and spiritually. The physical piece and the medical piece, I sort of leave that for people and their doctors and whoever is advising them in that context.
You've shared your journey in the
shared
physical
it.
and medical, but you're not trying to give advice in that space.
Right,
which
I
think
don't
is
give
wise,
advice. Yeah, I don't talk about what I think is the best treatment for cancer, ways to avoid cancer medically and all that kind of stuff. I've always, even from as a Christian who believes that God still heals today, and the whole concept of healing within the evangelical church is huge. And I think that is a major focus when someone gets diagnosed with cancer. It's like this crowd of people that come alongside and say, let's get healing here. Let's pray for your healing, your physical healing. And I didn't even focus on that piece of it. For me, my focus for my cancer journey has been this is the question: how does God want to transform me in this journey? How different am I from the start of this to where I am now, and what has God done? And so that required me to go into the spiritual and emotional aspects of it. And I haven't intentionally looked at stuff for how, God, what tools do you want to give me? I have not been intentional about that. These tools have come to me. I ended up in recovery 10 years ago now, and the tools for that were great. I met you, and we started to do emotionally healthy spirituality and all that stuff, and those tools were
I thought
awesome.
you were getting ready to call me a tool. You tool. I met you. You're a tool.
Well, Sean, you're a big time reader and thinker, and you've helped me with, how can I use these tools? You talk a lot about tools, even the latest Storywork tool. So you are highly interested in researching and learning, and you're very intellectual, analytical in that space with these tools, and that has just enhanced me. Like, what tool is Sean on now?
Well, we're going to talk a bit on this whole structure today. That's a big piece of what we want to do today.
All that to say that 20 years later, but 2 years later in the podcast, I've done this thing not feeling well, I'm sick, done this thing after surgeries, before surgeries, treatments, whatever. But for me, it's very therapeutic to sit down and discuss this journey with you.
So we're going to talk about structure. And then while we're doing that, I'm going to pre-questions for you to be in your mind.
Okay.
Favorite episode out of the 100 that you might be able to think of. And maybe, I don't want to call it least favorite episode, but most awkward or something. One that sticks out as, don't want to do that one again. That would be interesting. And then also, before we complete, maybe some things that maybe you've learned in the process as you go on, something that you want to share at the end. We had talked a little bit earlier, the fact that we have put so many tools on the table, and it wasn't just a preset. We didn't put structure around it. We just talked about the tools that you were using in your own life and our own journeys, how they've intertwined the tools that we've had out there. And I think there's a caution of thinking of, well, the pathway to peace is through a tool.
Right.
And I don't think that's what we're trying to say is, there's a process, and you describe this as a spiritual journey, and we use the term inner journey a lot. And so we want to kind of build on that a little bit just today, just to talk about the overall framework. And it's not that this is the way. This is a bit of what you've learned in your own journey, some things that have helped you along the way. And we've thought a lot about this concept of thinking about your journey as it's as if you've gone on a hike through the wilderness and you've left some trail markers along the way. Yeah. And there are a lot of ways to get through on a hike, maybe if you're going through the forest or in the mountains. But if you leave trail markers, they can be helpful. Hey, somebody's gone in this road before and they're pointing to something that was important that helps you on this path. And so I think of your life for cancer journeys, people don't need to come and mirror it, but they may find that trail marker helpful in their own journey and trying to navigate a journey through something that may feel like a climb to the top of a mountain or a deep hike in the forest, and where it's confusing and at times you're not sure which direction to go. To find a trail marker can be a lifeline. And so I, in many ways, would think of this podcast as trying to throw and put trail markers out or throw lifelines along the way, not because we're saying this is the way, but this is your journey along this way. And you didn't get there without trail markers yourself. There were a lot of lifelines and trail markers, which I think we're using the word tool around a bit, but they are people who have gone on some similar journeys that left trail markers. So I think we're going to cover some of those today, right?
Yeah, I mean, these have not been original thoughts for me.
Yeah.
I've really utilized the other journeys that people have taken that, like you said, resonates with me. So I've used them for my own journey as trail markers.
Yeah, fair enough. You're,
Yeah.
The wheel has not been reinvented.
No, I haven't invented anything.
But you do have original thoughts, and your life is an original story. I think this is something that we want people to connect with, is everybody does have an original story, and most of us have original thoughts also that are unique to us, and getting those out. And that's part of why you would have a podcast, is to be able to share the uniqueness of your story in life and thoughts. There's a concept that we started just talking about as building a house. And I liked this idea. And you were saying the question was, in the cancer and peace journey, what's the foundation?
Yeah.
And you had thoughts on that right away. And so
that was
I'll
easy.
start you out. So we're building today. We're going to think of this structure and a journey, your journey to peace. What's the house and what's the foundation?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it too. The journey to peace for me.
Yeah.
And the starting point, or the foundation, the whole house was built on a concept which I've incorporated into my life. It's been my life really mantra, and that is blessed are those who are spiritually poor. It's been a spiritual poverty foundation, and that sounds like, I think, like, oh yeah, we probably all have that, but no, it's a very intentional place to go to.
Yeah.
And I've always been attracted, even as a boy growing up in the evangelical church, to 12-steppers. And it wasn't necessarily because I was attracted to addicts. It's because there was this concept of this powerlessness that I didn't know how it worked in my life. I just knew there was something to that, some kind of a truth embodied in that place of being spiritually poor, having to look to your higher power for life itself.
And this is also defined as the wall or the dark night of the soul. And so if you're here listening to this podcast, good chance that you are, because you're on a cancer journey. Maybe not, but if you are, that's the wall. That's a wall in your life. It is a cancer journey is for almost inevitably is going to come out as a wall in your life, and walls can bring you to this foundational point, which is poverty of spirit. And you defined it as powerlessness and a recognition that you had a need greater than what you could provide inside of yourself. What a great place to start for building towards peace. It seems the opposite. Like, if you're going to build towards peace, shouldn't I want strength? And no, you're saying, no, it's the opposite. Peace comes, the start of that comes at poverty of spirit.
Yeah. There's a lot of tensions or paradoxes I have found within my spiritual journey. So that's one of them.
Yeah. And this presumes something that's there. And I think, and I'll go backwards in our analogy to build a house. You need a land to build on. You need a place to build. And sometimes we would think of the foundation as being up. I'm going to think of the land, the place you're building is on the rock of Jesus Christ. Like, he's there as a starting point. You had a faith journey coming into your cancer journey.
Right.
You were already professed in belief in Jesus, and you had surrendered your life to him. And so that's a place that you were already ready to build upon. And so, but the cancer journey brought you to laying a foundation, a new foundation on that land.
Yeah. And for me, it was a journey into powerlessness. It just didn't happen. I mean, I recognize I was not in control even in the beginning, but I think it was 10 years into it with a very at my 14th surgery, a very serious situation where I was not expected to live, and I was in a deep state of depression in that place down in Manhattan, that I really came to the end of myself. I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but to say I had nothing left. I had no answers. I mean, it was truly a place of complete poverty within myself. And I'm not saying everyone has to get to that point. I'm just saying that I found myself in that place.
You've left a trail marker there.
Mm-hmm.
I might argue that everyone does have to get to that place.
Okay.
But we could digress and spend a lot of time in that. But I do think this concept of getting to
or
powerlessness.
maybe I should say people's journeys into that space look different all the time,
yes,
right?
that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah, mine was definitely getting into an end of myself because of my diagnosis and prognosis.
Yeah, you don't have to be told to call hospice and prepare an end of life process.
I've had a thick head, a thick skull. God's had to do a lot of outrageous things with me.
So let's build on that for the foundation. You had this foundation. The journey brought you to powerlessness, and it wasn't just cancer. You had a collapsing marriage and a lot in your life, multiple walls happening at the exact same time that brought you to powerlessness and a place of brokenness. And so at that point, you were ready to build on the foundation. And I think this is where you and I both have had our experiences collided at this point because of your recovery journey. You would say that
I knew you, but we weren't yet really good friends until recovery. Yeah.
And so we think that
and you were walking into recovery to help somebody else.
Yeah, I had no problems.
Yeah, you didn't. Yeah.
I was building my house.
Someday we got to talk about your descent into spiritual poverty.
I had to go back and clear off all those timbers and start back and get back to poverty of spirit. So yes, but I wasn't coming to build a house. I was coming because I was invited to help frame somebody else's house.
Yeah,
and then I was like, oh, wait a second, what's going on here?
Yeah,
I don't even know how to frame my own house. Why would I be framing their house for?
Yeah,
that's so funny, right?
Yeah.
So. We would actually say right now, from our experience, that a trail marker we would leave along the way, or the next step is to build on that foundation, is to look at recovery, this 12 steps. And we would actually say in Celebrate Recovery, which is the program you and I both been involved with, they have these 8 principles that line up with the 12 steps, which align with the Beatitudes in the Bible. That these are, in a sense, the timbers that make up the structure of really learning how to do an inner journey and begin that. They provide just so much structure to a road of exploration here for an inner journey. I
mean, we kind of very loosely said, like, 12 steps are the 8 principles. Like the first 3 steps were getting peace with God. You know, like the next 3 steps or 4 steps were peace with ourselves.
Yes.
And then after that was peace with others. You know, so we kind of had that. And we used the word peace when we talked about the 12 steps.
Yes, that was so good. Yes.
Yeah.
That was been a long time ago, but we did share that. And I think
Johnny D came up with that one, I think.
Yeah, and I love those categories.
Yeah.
Peace with God, peace with ourselves, and peace with others. And those, there were... What happens, and the reason why we think of this as like timbers in our structure, is that it provided a roadmap too. It provided just how do you do it? How do you walk into this? And the 12 steps do a great job of really trying to help you to see to do that, from, looking at it and making a declaration that of turning your life and will over to God's care and control, to making a spiritual and moral inventory that is serious, that takes time to account for our lives. And then going from there to how have I hurt others, and taking accountability for how I've hurt others and who has hurt me.
Yeah. And I would say now, after 10 years in it, don't not do a 12-step program because you don't think you have an addiction. I didn't have like a drug, alcohol, or porn addiction. It was a codependency issue that I had to really research, but that didn't bring me into the halls of recovery. But what I found is that the 12 steps and the 8 principles were a whole spiritual formation program. It's like the best kept secret.
Spiritual formation program. This is good.
Yeah.
And the reason why you would say that is that it led you onto a new depth of spiritual journey that you hadn't been on before, even though you'd been in the church for 40 years
Oh
or
man.
some crazy number like that, right?
42 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then suddenly I was on this recovery journey that God brought me into.
Yeah. And describe what it is in the recovery that you found that wasn't part of your normal spiritual formation.
That definitely the concept of powerlessness, which was really critical because I couldn't manage my life. There's certain decisions I can make for myself, but ultimately in the sense of living a Christian life and doing a Christian walk, I was powerless in a lot of areas to do that. And I needed Jesus to intervene. And I've said that before, but I never was at that like rock bottom prodigal son point where I said, Jesus, my life is a disaster without you, and I need you to intervene in every area. But then definitely the step 4 inventory, to do a fearless and honest inventory of myself and admit all my secret sins, all my sins to God, myself, and another person. I had never done it, another person. I was scared and I felt shame. Mm-hmm. And so recovery through the rules that create safety gave me a venue, a forum to be able to do that. And that was huge for me. Getting honest with myself, God, and another person was a huge breakthrough.
Yeah, I think a good way to think about this, everybody experiences shame in their life. Mm-hmm. And how do you deal with shame? And recovery teaches you that taking ownership for all those things that you did do in your life, and also examining the story of where shame comes from, because there are certain things that you were given a story of shame, which is actually a story that has been given to you that you didn't do. Mm-hmm. And then it provides a roadmap for how to heal from that. And it's funny because I think from a maybe traditional church, definitely from the world, the way to handle shame is through strength, is to put on a show of strength. So if you think about in social media, if I put out that, hey, I've got the best car, the biggest house, the finest of everything as your show, then, but it's still, when you actually look at your real life, you know that it's just a show. It's putting on a show. I think the idea of this is the way to handle shame is to be able to share your deepest sins, the real you, and also share the real you that isn't shameful. And in that environment, find great healing with others, by, like one of the greatest gifts, the way to defeat shame is to not run from it, but to face it.
And I'm going to add right now, because I think it fits, and you didn't talk about this part of the house yet, but emotionally healthy spirituality, a concept that Pete talked about is you can't know God without knowing yourself.
Yeah. And
the shame aspect was part of it, but step 4 became a big self-awareness journey for me. I didn't know myself until I did that.
Yeah, I think that's facing the recovery, what it does. The reason why it builds to great pieces that when we face ourselves, on the surface, it's scary because of shame and all that is true. But we also in recovery, we come to an understanding of this much deeper concept, and that is that we are created in the image of God. And if you're able to get to know yourself past just your shame issues, you can actually get to see God's image in you. Mm-hmm. And this is where there's great joy in rediscovering who you really are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's great peace once you can live out of who you really are.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why most people get into recovery is because of addictions, and addictions are usually from coping methods of trying to cover the pain or the reality of deep hurts or deep shame in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's when we can't face ourselves, we use coping mechanisms, drugs, alcohol, pornography, sexual addiction, workaholism. All those things are all things to cover up the real hurt and shame we feel. And this Brene Brown concept really stuck out to me, is like when we try to stuff shame with drugs, alcohol, or any other coping mechanism out there, we don't just stuff the shame, we stuff joy, because you cannot selectively stuff emotions. And so recovery really opened the door to joy, which works into peace, because it opened the door to experience the other side of that. It's when you stop coping and you can face shame, you can experience joy. And that's why this is such a great trail marker for.
Yeah. And you brought me into, I didn't know anything about emotionally healthy spirituality while I was in recovery. And the whole premise of it was, in order to be spiritually healthy, you have to be emotionally healthy, which was this unbelievably foreign concept to me.
Yes, and this is maybe as we build on the house, if you have framework, and we think that recovery provides a great framework because it's a way, it's something you can continue to work, and you can work in many layers, and it provides steps and a process for finding healing. One of the things that we thought made great sense is to think of tools such as emotionally healthy spirituality. I would also put John Eldredge's work, Wild at Heart, some of these works, in as siding and windows and roof that provide structural integrity and a level of beauty and understanding of what the structure's purpose and what's going on, in a sense of it, an enclosure around, seeing, making something whole. And what we found is there's great tools in some of these other resources, and emotional health is big.
Yeah. Huge.
And emotional health is, there's this concept that Scalzo would say on a regular basis. It's like, old feelings don't die, they get buried alive. And the moment that we start recognizing that we're made in the image of God, then we don't have to look at our emotions as something that needs to be stuffed or negative, but they're literally, they're warning lights on our dashboard. They are indicators of something that needs to be paid attention to, and we can live and walk in our humanity.
Yeah, and I think for me it was, I believe that the cancer journey is filled with grieving. Yeah. And we've lost the ability to grieve well, I think, in our current culture, and especially in the church. And Emotionally Healthy Spirituality was a program that awakened me to giving me permission to be sad and to look behind the sadness, and to mourn and to look behind the mourning and the grieving, the whole grieving process. Because it's all through Scripture, people grieving.
I want to put something out here with this. And this is maybe, as we're celebrating this 100th episode, is the number of times you and I have talked about on this podcast and behind the scenes as we've been interacting, the number of people who have hid their cancer journey.
Yes.
And in the process of hiding that, they've hid something beautiful to be shared with the rest of the world. And so to me, this podcast reflects something really beautiful about you sharing the harder emotions of the struggle. You shared a few minutes ago the number of times you've been here in great pain, or just struggling to just to do another week of whatever is going on in your life, has been a labor of love, in the sense of you're still sharing your cancer journey. And there's something deeply meaningful there.
Yeah, to be given permission to feel fear, anger, and sadness, not be put into a place of shame, but to be able to note that I was created wired with emotions, and that the emotions are meant to express and process. And that's been huge for me, not to let those emotions rule over me, but to not be ashamed of them or stifle them either, to let them out. That's been really a huge learning center, and something that I've really had to, to become emotionally healthy is to feel. And,
Yeah.
and, Scalzo is big on entering into that space. He introduced me to Silence and Solitude, which we took off on you and me. We did all reading separate books. You've led seminars on it, which I was a part of. So even that spiritual practice, I mean, the contemplative kind of Christianity, not the run-through performance-based Christianity, which was me. I became a more contemplative Christian through this, where I would meditate and do silence and solitude. I mean,
yeah, I think
those are big changes.
Yeah, these are indicative of some really big concepts. And
Yes.
we talk about pretty regularly transactional.
Yeah.
Transactional people generally are, like when I came to mission, I was transacting still. I was trying to perform something to meet a standard for God that I could be worthy, lovable, valuable. And cancer, I believe, is a tool to move you from transactional to relational. And to be relational, you have to be able to share your real self, to engage your real emotions, to find the beauty that's deep inside of you. And so this is a big part of your journey.
And deeper. I mean, I love the points Scalzo made of not only the dark night of the soul, but that deep suffering can bring us to a place of deeper revelation of God. It's like, wow, this isn't a waste, what I'm going through. There's a whole plan in this thing where I can enjoy a deeper intimacy with Jesus. That's been monumental for me.
John Eldredge is releasing a work right now called that is one he'd done before, but he's reworked it because it's such an important work, and Sacred Romance. And most people think it's a book about marriage, but it's actually a book about God's love and pursuit of you and your heart, and getting in touch with your heart, the real you, and being able to live out of that with adventure and with the sense of all the stages of yourself. And I've been working on a book that is Fathered by God, and I just love these concepts of our stages of our journey. And he talks about, for a man, it's like, going from boyhood, to cowboy, where there's boyhood, you're really finding deep love and attachment with the inner self of who you are in a safe environment. Cowboys, you're learning to take risks and to see how those play out, and learn your own skills in life. And to warrior, that there's something worth fighting for. To lover, to king, that there's things that you actually are given dominion over, to rule over, to be in charge of. To sage, that as you walk this journey of life, that you have the ability to grow in wisdom and understanding, and that wisdom and understanding can be shared and interacted on with others. Those are great stages in the journey for an individual. And it's really speaking about your heart, is allowing your heart to enjoy each stage and to learn who you are and to live out of your true self as opposed to a false self.
Yeah.
And they're important stages. And I think so many of us, for all of us, some aspect of those stages have been damaged. Whether it be the early boyhood or cowboy, where we're maybe afraid to take risks, or we don't learn who we really are, what the gifts that God has given us in our story. And so, man,
it just strikes me there's so much to talk about of just the recovery, the John Eldredge and the EHS space, emotionally healthy spirituality, and how it relates to the cancer journey.
Yeah.
But these are all parts of the house.
Yeah.
Right. And then recently we got into something else because you got into it. I follow you along.
We're both in it deep right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love this next, and we've shared about it in the last few episodes, has been story work, where you get time to really examine your story and to have that story bring great healing, because it's interpreted through the lens of people who care and love you, to help you, your brain heal. and your mind heal, and that's a way of having your mind renewed. And there's great peace in sharing these real hard stories of great shame, failure, but also we have really benefited from not just the stories of harm, but the stories of blessing. In fact, tonight we're going to hear 2 stories of blessing when you and I do our story work with a group of guys. And I have found those to be places of great emotion, but to enter into somebody's story with them. And one of the concepts we put out in this podcast is that your story, whoever's listening to this right now, your story is more meaningful, more profound than any Hollywood script that's ever been written. And most people don't believe that about themselves. But once you start diving in, I can tell you that our story work time has been so meaningful. Like and I got to hear my own son share a story of blessing, and I could not control the emotion because I was there in that place with him, and to just feel the tears of just great meaning in his life. There is nothing more valuable than to be able to engage real people in real journey relationally. That's our greatest gift we have here.
Not to regress, but that must have been a great blessing for you, because something that you meant to be a blessing in his life was a monumental blessing for him.
Yeah, and what's funny is there's overlaps to these stories, because inside of every story of blessing, I know the guys have talked about.
Yeah.
Usually the story of blessing is in conjunction to a story of harm.
Yeah.
And
or vice versa.
And the blessing that he shared was a blessing because he needed that blessing for some of the harm that he was going to endure, of which I was a part of. Yeah. And so it was so hard to hear, to face some of that at the same time, because I knew the bigger story. And so as that took place, the emotion of that moment, though, but to know that God had been in the midst of that and there was great blessing, and for to hear him share that was one of the most emotional, like just such strong emotion building inside of me. But I just say that story work, what I found it to be is at a level of depth in sharing and understanding that I haven't seen with very many tools that we've been involved with. And I'm not discounting any of the others. And you and I talked about it. It's like, I think there's a great caution of saying, hey, we've arrived at this place. And I think what we're really saying is, no, this part of the journey has been so deep and meaningful. And I'm pretty sure there's many more depths to go. Yeah. And so as we've gone to the forest or climbed the mountain, we're leaving a marker here of something going, wow, this has really blown me away to be a part of the stories of these guys, and to share in those, and to see healing of
it's been huge
interpretation and reality.
You and I were talking about this before, but I think, I'm older now, but any time in my life where I've said, this is the church, this is the book, this is the program, I've always been corrected. That there's a ton of tools out there or trail markers.
Yeah.
But this is, I think the unique thing about the podcast is these are the trail markers that you and I have been on, and these are the ones I've been on for my cancer journey. So
I define the story work as almost like putting the sheetrock on the walls of the interior of the house, and you're putting finished work in a way. And it's not that the house is finished. I think there's something that you and I have talked about in this podcast in a different order, but we talked about deep relationship, the deep meditation, silence and solitude, being in God's presence is much more like bringing warmth to that house in the room, where the furnishings and the pictures, and there's much more connection. There's more warmth as the house is furnished and decorated, and there's more meaning, because an empty house, it's a house, it's a structure, but when God's in a room, it's as if all the furnishings, the comfort, the chairs, all the things are in place. And it's more than that, because you actually need the presence of a real person. It's not just furnishings, but this idea of there's so much more for us to grow into and to experience is something that we want to, it's like, there's not, we reached peace, we're there, use these 5 tools and you're done. It's go on this journey and you're going to find that it's so deep and rich and meaningful, and you're going to be bringing all sorts of similar tools in your journey, and you're going to share your cancer journey with others, and they're going to be blessed by it, and you're going to find great peace because God has so much meaning in the story, I think.
Yeah.
That's a big part of the house. What about for you, those early questions I threw out there before we close our episode out here?
Yeah, quickly. I think for my favorite episode or the worst one, let's say,
Hardest, maybe.
Yeah, hardest. Not worst, but hardest. I can't. I mean, I did enjoy some. I mean, I've enjoyed every episode, but I think there's been a few that have really caught my interest, like what happens when God says no, or where is God? What happens when you don't see God? Like those are kind of foundational ones which cut against the grain probably for evangelicals and folks that think if I just pray it's going to happen. And
I like there's no silver bullet.
Yeah, there's no silver bullet.
That was one that I really enjoyed just thinking about the concept, like the idea that so much of our life we're looking for a silver bullet and it doesn't exist. And the just learning from that in the cancer space, your own journey, is that there's never been a silver bullet. Yeah,
the concept of if I don't get the result that I want, can I still trust God? And do I have that kind of intimacy with Him?
Yeah,
kind of like the child that the parent says no. I mean, of course, that the parent's going to say no at certain times to that child. That's in the best interest of that child. So, and I think the hardest episode, I think probably more recently was the one that I did regarding that tough surgery that I had, and kind of going back and trying to remember the details, but also feeling the intensity of that moment was
reliving that. Yes. Yeah. I kind of wondered if that would be the case.
Yeah.
And what about aha moments? Anything that from the 2 years that you've learned or just connected with that you just think stick out to you?
Yeah, I think some of the most beneficial episodes for me was when you took me through my journal, because that was my diary, and I always kind of summed it up in my own words. But you actually looked at what was happening in me. I hadn't done that yet. It was this raw emotions, stating things as facts or truths, which really weren't, turned out not to be. But it was my fear.
That was that was such an honoring experience for you to take time to read your journal with us and to let us engage at that level of depth. To me was a great honor for us to be able to be a part of. And I would say had a lot of meaning to be able to be a part of that in your life as your friend, and to walk through that was an honor. Yeah.
Thank you. But I think for me, it really it further solidified a process of what happens when I hit the wall. Feeling those raw emotions, giving myself permission to have fear, anger, and sadness, but then process those emotions, which is what I did. And then turning to the Word of God and letting God speak into my life, letting the Holy Spirit have a very present voice in my life, making those choices to do that. And so it was really interesting because the prognosis and the diagnosis didn't change, but my journey into peace changed tremendously. Yeah. And I still am standing on that bedrock, even after I had news that I was going to pass in 2017. I'm still on this journey. I still just had a PET scan recently. I mean, I have a bag on the outside of me now. It just goes, it's 20 years now.
There's no certainty. There's no,
it's still going.
As many questions now as there have been.
Yeah. I mean, I saw my surgeon a couple of weeks ago, and he said he was in France, and people were saying, "How's Peter doing?" And I guess I'm known by my first name, but it's this, number one, how is this guy still living? He's an anomaly. And then what's happening with his journey now medically? And but it's interesting because, like, I sat down with my oncologist A couple of weeks ago, she asked me how my podcast was going. My medical team, some of them were listening to it. There's this concept of perhaps there are ways to travel on this cancer journey that actually are a benefit to that cancer patient. They're so used to the microscope is only on the medical aspect, but there's other aspects that they're seeing in me, and they're just wondering, asking the question, are there other?
Yes.
Like, why is Peter surviving? Why does what's going on?
Yeah, it's interesting perspective. Because I was thinking about what you're saying is, it could be that your cancer journey is only an improvement of a negative circumstance medically.
Right.
But it could be that your cancer journey is also not an improvement of a negative, but a birth of something deep and meaningful and not negative, but positive in your life and journey that you're experiencing. I think that's what if I look at your life and if we're celebrating today, it is a birth of something that is so much more meaningful than cancer ever was. That's why there's peace. It's not that you are downplaying or trying to just spiritualize away the cancer. It is saying, in comparison, they are in the same category.
Right.
And you've told me this, you would do this journey again. You wouldn't wish it on your worst enemy, but you would do it again if that's what it takes to have what you have in your life.
I would just close or end my part of this with back to that station wagon concept. Or I'll say this, to be on it, I feel like I'm on a train. I have no clue where the train's going. Twists and turns. Looks like bad weather ahead. I have no clue. And can I surrender and trust in the one who's driving the train? And that for me is Jesus Christ. Can I do that? Am I able to do that? Do I have times where I have fear, anger, and sadness? Yes, but ultimately, am I going to put both feet in that camp and to find peace on that train?
Yes.
Because I'm playing with my little guys. I'm reading books. I'm doing all my things that I love to do. Enjoying myself.
Yes, so much trust in that person who's driving the car that the weather doesn't matter. You're able to read and play with your little army men and enjoy life.
Yeah, that's the little boy in me playing with that stuff, right?
That's right. Yeah. And it's such a great picture. I think that's because there's peace there is what you're really describing. You're describing a picture of peace. And so, we just invite you to, next episode is 101, which means we're going to have Dalmatians here. And right?
I don't have any black and white things to wear.
We're going to do something, right? We have to. Anyway, but Peter, thanks for sharing your life. To me, being able to share 100 episodes of such a meaningful cancer journey that is the peace in your life and your willingness to share has just been an honor and a joy. And I know that if you're listening to this podcast, we're inviting you to be in part of that journey also. And I think you're on a journey that is deep and meaningful, and we want to honor you also. And so thanks for listening.
Thanks for your commitment, Sean, and your giftedness that's brought me on this journey, helped to bring me on this journey.
It's been a joy. And so thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.